Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 19th of July, 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish, and we're delighted to be joined by David Scott. David, of course, bringing us northern exposure from north of the border.
We're going to start in Aspen, Colorado, because Aspen is the location of the Aspen Security Forum. This is kind of the United States version of the Munich Security Conference. The best thinkers go there, apparently, if not the best thinkers of the United States, certainly the best thinkers of the world. And this is the 10th year it's been held. China apparently has grown more sophisticated in its cyber capabilities, so that's of concern. It's now considered a direct peer of the United States after years of lagging behind. And there are concerns about the hybrid threat. This, of course, comes from Russia mainly, and that governments, Russia, are contracting out to what they're calling criminals in order to pursue that policy of hybrid warfare. And they're saying that that Russia is going to interfere in the next US election. So
Right.
that's good stuff. And this is sort of continued here. Something, there we go. Russia is, they're mainly concerned about the Arctic, and this is a concern for the conference. They want the United States to get involved in the Arctic as well, make sure that that becomes a potential front in the war. But we'll be glad to know, that was coming from Admiral Carl Schultz, by the way, but we're glad to know that the Secretary General of NATO is there. We'll come on to that in a second, but before he left, he made sure, or at least over the week, he made sure that this photograph was pushed out, because now that Federica is out the door in a couple of months, he needs to find a new blonde to be getting on well with. And he's clearly decided that Ursula fits the bill. So this could be a productive relationship, Brian.
Well, was I right in believing it already had been that she'd had 7 children?
But not with Jens Stoltenberg.
Oh, of course.
Not that I'm aware with. Not that I'm aware of,
absolutely
anyway.
not.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, she's made her effort for society.
Absolutely. Now, Jens doing a big tour of of North America anyway, and he began in Canada. Because in Canada, apparently, they are united and they are free, as you can see on screen there. That's a fantastic little piece of propaganda from the Canadians. And not to, put it, what can you say about this? This is Niagara Falls. In celebration of the fact that Jens Stoltenberg was there on Monday, they decided to turn the Niagara Falls blue. I don't really know what to say about that.
No.
But anyway, he went on following Canada to the Aspen Security Forum, and he was talking about Turkey with the S-400s. He was talking about Iran. He was talking about China. NATO is a regional organization, so we don't have any plans of moving into the South China Sea. Some of our member states might, he said, but not us. And he was also talking about the S-400 in Turkey. We'll come on to that in a second. And he said that, NATO represents half the world's economic and military might. And together they're stronger in dealing with present and future security challenges. So he was very keen to reinforce the transatlantic cooperation, a great relationship with the European Union. And of course, we've got to put that in the context of what Nigel Farage had made the point in the European Parliament the other day, that in fact European Defence Union spells the end of NATO in Europe. Well, he's pretty much determined to try to make sure that that's not the case. But in the meantime, we mentioned a week or so ago exercise Seabreeze, and that exercise is now completed, but not to be outdone by that. There's a new one. So if you remember, Seabreeze was 19 nations, 15 NATO allies. This was co-led by the United States and Ukraine. And Turkey was involved in that. This is an interesting point that we'll come on to in a second. But a new exercise taking place at the moment, this time Platinum Lion 2019 in the same kind of region. And we've got various national armies and Albanians taking part, Bulgarians taking part. This is happening in Bulgaria. So we got to keep the pressure on Russia.
Yeah, all in those Eastern European states. Yeah.
But good news, Brian, because here is the Serapis framework. This is the DSTL, the Ministry of Defence and Defence Science and Technology Laboratory. They've announced a new framework. It's called Serapis. It was announced a while back, but they've announced the companies that they're going to partner with on this. Now, what they say is that this framework will focus on areas of command, control, computers, communication, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, space systems, synthetic environments, and simulation technology to support human capability development. And it's apparently all about reaching non-traditional defence suppliers, small and medium-sized enterprises and academia, right? So they have announced the winners of the first round of money for this. They're releasing this in terms of lots. So who have we got? BAE Systems, Applied Intelligence Limited, Kinetic Limited. They win 3 of the 6 lots.
So the usual suspects.
So the usual suspects. These are non-traditional defence suppliers, apparently. Roke Manor Limited was going to cover the development and integration of new and emerging ISTAR Collect technology and techniques into the wider defence and cross-government ISTAR enterprise. Do you know what that means?
Not exactly.
No, neither do I. So, but that's okay. Apparently, this is going to include quantum, gravity, and biometric sensing. And so on. This is the type of operation that they're going for. But Serapis framework, everything gets named after Egyptian, Greek gods, it seems.
So it's all rushing in, this stuff at the moment. The integration of the armed forces, particularly in Eastern Europe, all of these new surveillance systems, procurement. This is all coming together. This is EU Defence Union in action.
Absolutely, but David, we don't need to worry because Jens has already established his new relationship with the new president of the Commission.
Oh, it's all very cosy. And I was just looking when you were talking there how it was being spun in America. Oh, it's all about money. And the NATO Secretary General allies have contributed $116 million more to defence since Trump took office. And when you consider that Britain alone's $45 billion defence budget, that would be peanuts in the greater scheme of things, not how it's spun on the for the American news cycle. So yes, it's all spin, and we're looking for the substance.
Well, that's correct, but of course we've got to keep in mind that under the EU Defence Union plans, the EU is aiming to reach, I think, about a third, 30% or so of the US budget, which as an overall figure. But if I'm remembering correctly, David, that's still about double what the Russians are spending on defence.
Well, Russia in economic terms is smaller than California. It's something like New York State in terms of GDP. And therefore, to paint Russia as this huge bogeyman, albeit the Russians do seem to get a lot of effectiveness for their investment, but to paint them as some huge threat to the entire Western world is simply false. It's the case of we need someone to point at in order to justify the expenditure for other reasons.
Yes, well, okay, let's move on to this then. And this is the release of the annual report on the Conflict Stability and Security Fund. Now, for those that don't know, this is the report. This is the money which is spent on things like the white helmets and other things like this. According to the Cabinet Office, they're doing very well. They've been having casualties of various kinds. They're encouraging 3.1 million people to register to vote in Pakistan. They're creating opportunities for female inclusion in the Yemeni peace process. And they've halved the number of mine-related casualties in Ukraine. So that's all very good stuff. Let's have a look and see what they say that they're doing. They published some tables, and you can see how much money they're spending, and you can see what they're spending it on. So we've got security sector reform and defence engagement here. We've got economic development. We've got media freedom in that list. This is for the thematic spend. In terms of the Syria programs, they don't mention the white helmets in there, but of course we know that the money from parliamentary questions and so on, we know that money is going into those types of groups. But there's money being spent in education, more money on women, peace and security, and so on. So,
and at the bottom there, Mike, capacity building of multilateral institutions. This is getting in among. This is common purpose, getting in amongst institutions in order to steer them.
Absolutely. So then we've got the Ukraine Programme and Good Governance Fund, £26 million going into that. So that's all good stuff. Then we got £10 million going into the Colombia Security and Access for Justice for Peace Programme. Then we have £4.42 million going into the counter-Daesh communications, whatever that means, strategic communications activities overseas, strategic communications activities UK. What else have we got here? Another 8.27 million going into the Anguilla programme for infrastructure, health, revenue strengthening, education again. £6 million going into the Yemen programme. So this is going into the peace process, peace building, and stabilisation and security. And well, we've got what is the total budget here? Something like £1.258 billion being spent in the countries in dark blue there. And David, you've got to say that this is money well spent, because we're seeing the effect of £1.2 million because all these countries are experiencing the most pleasant peace, and they don't have any insurrection, they don't have any people trafficking, there's no sex slaves. It's a fantastic
it's all
job.
Peace and stability.
That the Conflict Stability and Security Fund is. And the question I've got to ask is, should this be read that the fund is about the stability and security of the conflict rather than trying to deal with the conflict?
It's hybrid warfare. This is the shock troops of hybrid warfare. We're going in and we're going to change how people think. Everything is in play. Everything is part of the battle. And we're moving chess pieces on the board. Those chess pieces include how people think, what they believe, what the press publishes, and what organizations are putting information into the public domain. So these are very powerful moves in the hybrid warfare that people like the Integrity Initiative were constantly accusing the Russians of engaging in. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not doing it because, as you know, David Ellis and I went to a Defence Committee meeting earlier in the year. You mentioned Integrity Initiative because Chris Donnelly was giving evidence of that. And they were particularly concerned about what, as you mentioned, the Russians are doing in this regard, but really we're not taking part in it at all.
The way I heard it, Chris Donnelly was particularly concerned about seeing the two of you in the room.
There may have been a bit of that. That's true. Okay, look, we've been talking about this over the last few months, and it's come to a head now because this is the F-35 and Turkey. Turkey, as you know, has taken delivery of parts of its S-400 missile defense system from Russia. And so the White House has yesterday, I think it was yesterday, gave a statement on this, yesterday or Wednesday, basically saying that this is completely impossible. It can't continue. It renders the continued involvement with the F-35 impossible. The F-35 cannot coexist with Russian intelligence collection platform that will be used to learn about its advanced capabilities. So they basically have said that Turkey cannot take part in the F-35 program in any regard from this point forward. So this is effectively going to lose Turkey, I believe, about $9 billion in revenue because the engine parts that they're manufacturing there, the other parts that they're building there are going to have to be built elsewhere. Now, yesterday I asked the Ministry of Defence to comment on this. The question was, where will the British F-35 engines be maintained now? Can we have an answer, please, Ministry of Defence? And quick as a flash, there was no answer.
Nothing happened.
Yeah. So we still don't know what the situation is with respect to our own F-35s because Turkey was the responsible party for maintaining the engines as part of this really silly procurement process that we seem to be required to go through these days with everything being done on a multinational basis. And if you fall out with one of the nations, then of course you're left with a big hole. But perhaps the reason that the Ministry of Defence doesn't want to answer this question is because actually they don't have an answer yet.
I'd suspect that's the case, Mike. It's going to be fascinating to see where we go on this one.
Yes.
I was just going to say, what a turkey.
Yes, what a turkey, yeah. Okay. If you like what UK Column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community. And there are various options there. And I'd just like to remind everybody that AV 10.1 is coming up in October, 27th of October, in the Holiday Inn, Kensington. Alternativeview.co.uk for tickets there.
But not many left, I don't
yes.
think. So if you're interested, get on to that link fairly quickly.
Okay, David, we're going to move on to Pink News here, and just a reminder that Republican lawmakers want to make child drag shows illegal.
Yes, oh, the horror. This was Pink News alerting its readers to an attack on their liberties to have children engaged in sexually charged drag shows. The couple of interesting things about this. Firstly, it's Ohio Representative Tim Schafer has proposed a bill in the state legislature to clamp down on performances by a child under the age of 18 years of age or a mentally physically handicapped child under 21 years of age engaging in drag shows. The interesting thing is the response to this tweet. If you go and look at the replies on Twitter, no one's buying this. It's being revealed as what it is. It's an attack on society, and it's an attack on the children. And people are rallying around to protect the interests of the children. This is the extreme left who want to change society, pushing beyond the point that people are willing to follow, I think.
And a related story from Canada. Another British Columbia woman forced out of business as transgender male genitalia waxing case. And this is from the Post-Millennial, but we've got an article from Spiked coming up as well. What's the background to this?
Right. Those who followed the Jordan Peterson case, where he was saying that he could be taken to court if he refused to use the appropriate pronoun that someone insisted that he use, and he could be fined, and if he refused to pay the fine, he would be jailed. This is what started all the Jordan Peterson attention when he refused to comply with this. He was highlighting the British Columbia, essentially social justice warrior-led legal system, which was compelling people to behave in a certain way. So here we have Yaniv, formerly Jonathan Yaniv, has taken 15 British Columbia women to the tribunal for refusing to wax her male genitalia, citing discrimination based on gender identity, and is seeking financial compensation. Now, I went looking for other stories because I don't know what the Post-Millennial is. This was so ridiculous, I thought this could be a wind-up, but it's not. It's in several sources. Here's the commentary from Spiked, from Brendan O'Neill, no less. He writes, Canada's bizarre trans waxing controversy. Female waxers are being branded transphobic because they refuse to wax a trans woman's bollocks, his choice of words. For proof that the woke war on common sense and decency is now completely out of control, look no further than Canada trans waxing controversy. A born male who identifies as female and who has male genitalia still intact is suing female-only waxers, and multiple of them, on the basis that their refusal to wax her bollocks, is an act of discrimination. Yes, this person believes that because he identifies as female, he should therefore have access to every female service, including the most intimate female services. Any female beautician who refuses to tend to his testicles is being transphobic, apparently, because they are denying his womanhood, even though he has a penis and testicles and is a man, and that's hate speech. I know, writes Brendan O'Neill. And he's revealing the complete absurdity of the law. And remember, this is the law in British Columbia. This is not people doing stupid things. This is the state coercing them to do stupid things, or else they will lose their business, their livelihood. They have to believe three impossible things before breakfast in order to comply with British Columbia law.
David, just challenge you a little bit there because you used the word absurdity. Of course, what's happening here is very calculated policy to bring these issues in, because ultimately they divide society, they bring groups of people at each other's throats, and also they are breaking down normal human relationships and normal human common sense, or the application of common sense. So I'm just going to say I don't think this is absurd at all. This is this is particularly vile, devious policy, which is designed to produce an outcome. And we'll have a little bit more having a look on what's happening with transgender in a minute.
This is a point that we'll get to later when we're looking at Scotland. That the policies on the surface seem to make no sense and seem to be contradictory. One policy seems to be pushing in the opposite direction from another, but they're not contradictory when you understand their purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Scottish issues, and Scotland has a drugs problem now. There's been quite a bit of media coverage over the last couple of years about the drugs problem that there is in the United States. It's considered, particularly with opiate and opiate-related drugs, it's considered epidemic levels. So one of the things that Trump has claimed that he's going to do is to sort that problem out, but it's certainly at least been recognised as a problem in the States. Up to this point, it hasn't been recognised as a problem in Scotland. And the Telegraph here, headline is Scotland has worst drug problem in Europe as death rate soars. And the first paragraph you have here is Scotland's drug death rate is now higher than the USA and every other country in Europe, and 3 times the UK average, according to shocking new figures. If that's true, it would be pretty shocking.
It's true. Now, it's true, and it's happened quite recently. The huge escalation has happened in the last 5 years or so. 27% increase this last year alone. Now, a couple of things are noticeable here. Firstly, the blame game in Scottish politics continues. It's Westminster's fault. No, it's Holyrood's fault. It's pathetic. And the answer that it's Westminster's fault obviously doesn't get to the why is it 3 times worse in Scotland. When the alcohol pricing minimum pricing laws came in, I did go public and say to the SNP via Twitter, if there are increased deaths, will you reverse this? Because what happens is if you take away from the most vulnerable in society some of the crutches they're using to get through the day, they will, if you make those unaffordable, they'll seek alternatives, and you tend to get lower quality products coming in through the black market. I didn't know what it would be, whether it would be homemade alcohol and problems with that or what, but it seems to have had an effect. That was what I predicted, and this is what's happened. And I think it should be one of the possibilities that's been borne in mind, that simply trying to coerce people to change their behaviour by means of economic pressure and nudge unit type policies doesn't get to the heart of the emptiness in society and the psychological and spiritual pain that they're in, that they are treating with alcohol or other drugs. And unless we get to those problems, we'll simply displace the problem from one place to an even worse place.
Okay, but there's a slightly broader question here, because if Scotland is 3 times the number of deaths from other parts of the UK, then that implies that there are 3 times the number of people that are self-medicating, whatever the mechanism is that they're doing that. And so the question is, what is it about Scotland which is causing that to be the case, if it is the case?
No, that's not my point, Mike. My point is that in Scotland, low-priced alcohol has been eliminated, and it's now high-priced alcohol. So what's changed is the means, is the product use that they're self-medicating with. Because it wasn't 3 times the English level before. It was a little higher, but it wasn't anything like this. And the change is in the policy, the pricing, the taxation regime, and the effects that's had, not in the number of lost souls.
Right. So, sorry, just to clarify this, then, are you saying that the SNP has increased taxes on alcohol at a higher rate than the rest of the UK?
Oh, dramatically so, yes.
Right.
It was a major policy to tackle the alcohol problem in Scotland. We're going to tackle low-priced alcohol. So you're now seeing, for ordinary kind of lager type beer, it's often twice the price in Scotland than it is in England in supermarkets. This type of thing. So that the low-cost offers and things have ended, and there's been a displacement effect, I believe. It's yet another of these unintended consequences. When the government says, it's okay, we're the government, we're here to help, we will fix things, you've got to really start to worry, because not only are they picking your pocket, but their attempts to fix things might leave them even more broken than before.
Okay, well, staying with Scotland then, let's have a look at this. This is Scottish Daily Mail. No faith in the SNP.
Now, what happened here is East Kilbride Straven Lesmahagow MP, Dr. Lisa Cameron, was in the House of Commons, and she took part in the vote on Northern Ireland legalising abortion or liberalising abortion in Northern Ireland. And for reasons of her belief and her personal philosophy as well, she voted against this. She has been then subject to an enormous vitriolic hate campaign by largely members of the SNP and voices within the SNP and nationalist grouping in Scotland, because she's not followed the agenda. You see, the agenda is pro-abortion. It's imported from the States. It's postmodernism. You have to keep with the cult. She stepped outside the bounds of the cult, and boy, have they let her know.
Okay, so this article here, MP accuses SNP of smear attempt to deselect her. So they're actually attempting to get her removed as an MP at the next election. Is that it?
Yes, she's been told that she would never have got the post had she revealed her views. And she's been attacked in all sorts of ways on social media. This next slide here, this is from the Sunday Post. Reads, Lisa Cameron was reduced to tears after receiving more than 1,000 messages from trolls, some with pictures of aborted babies and rape scenes. But the backlash she received from SNP activists has made her angry. One message read, if only abortions could be performed to fully grown adults, you would be top of the list, you scumbag. So that's the message from the love and hope community there.
A couple of weeks ago, there was quite a furore on Twitter about Nigel Farage being hit with a milkshake, and a couple of people talking about acid on Twitter, and they were getting a very hard time for having made, suggesting that acid would have been a better thing to throw at him than a milkshake. Yep. But that's a pretty gross tweet. If only abortions could be performed on fully grown adults. If I remember correctly, quite a number of MPs at the moment are concerned and expressing concern about threats to their lives, but that seems like a threat to an MP. But I haven't heard anything from the current Speaker or any of the Westminster MPs in her support in this case.
No, that's a good point. It seems that only certain MPs saying certain things get defended, and the ones who are saying things which are maybe more traditional just strangely don't. It just seems to be missed. Continuing here with the Sunday Post, she writes, because I was told it was a free vote, I voted with my heart and conscience because of my personal experience. I've done nothing wrong. I will fight this. She revealed she was devastated and very wrought over losing two much longed for babies. She had 2 miscarriages. That was part of the reason she felt so strongly. And then she also says she was very disappointed that Nicola Sturgeon had not publicly offered her support. This is where I came across it. I saw her reaching out to Nicola Sturgeon on Twitter, and what came back from Nicola Sturgeon was crickets, nothing. So just let that sink in for a minute. You have a female MP, SNP MP, being abused and threatened on Twitter, Facebook, and social media by SNP activists. She reaches out personally to Nicola Sturgeon as the party leader and asks for support, and she gets nothing. Yep. What message does that send?
Well, absolutely. So we've had a statement from the SNP. The SNP has long been home to elected members with a range of religious views, and none and no one would be failed at assessment because of their religious views. The SNP champions diversity in all its forms, but it seems to me that that's not the case at all.
Nope, that's a lie. The SNP champions diversity, unless it's diversity of opinions, in which case you're in big trouble. Now we move on to Bill Mills. Now, Mr. Mills here is a voluntary worker for the SNP, and he's involved in selection and reviewing of candidates. And he said, at no time did Miss Cameron ever indicate her opposition to women's rights of choice during her campaign to be elected in both general elections in which she stood. So he's saying that she never confessed her sin for believing that you shouldn't abort babies. And he goes on further here. So, excuse me, right, here we go. On the constituency Facebook site close to the public, he said he was utterly disgusted with the MP's actions and accused Dr. Cameron of making an attempt to impose her religious beliefs on the women of Northern Ireland. She's every right to hold whatever beliefs she chooses, but she cannot, however, expect anything other than the withdrawal of support for those who voted for her. In a separate post, she said, if Lisa Cameron was compelled to follow her conscience and reveal she disagreed with the fundamental policy of the party, remember this is a free vote, fundamental policy of the party, having never disclosed it before, then she should quit her position as an elected representative of the SNP. So he's calling for her to stand down because she opposed abortion on a free vote. And he continues, as an approved party assessor in the party vetting process, note the threat, were any potential candidate to reveal that they fundamentally disagreed with the Convention on Human Rights and women's rights to choose regarding abortion, and that they would vote to restrict the rights of women in Scotland or elsewhere they currently enjoy, then I would recommend that their application to be a candidate for MP, MSP or councillor be rejected. So he's been quite clear. If you believe that it's a crime to kill children in the womb, the SNP does not want you.
I pick up something else with this, David. It brings me to the young lad at the Mearns Academy, and you're being told here that you can have whatever opinion you like, but don't dare express that opinion, because if it contradicts the party line, you're going to suffer. So we're seeing this brought forward in schools. You've given that over the last couple of weeks. So the young lad who dared to challenge the number of sexes, he's told you can have your view, but you have to keep it at home. She can have her view, but she also has to keep it at home. Otherwise, you're going to be vilified by the party. Nice
exactly
party.
So, nice party. And here's a couple of other comments from people in the nice party. Jim Edwards, convener of SNP South Lanarkshire Liaison Committee, which oversees candidate selections, posted, she is not there to vote for her own conscience. She's there to vote on behalf of the people.
If that's the case, why did they hold a free vote?
I have no answer to that, Mike. Activist Ewan Purchase works for Aileen Campbell, or Aileen also Campbell, as she will forever be known, the Scottish Government's Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government. Backed Bill Mills stance, saying it was party policy to back women's right to choose. It's party policy not to believe in God, by the way. We haven't quite got round to saying it that bluntly. A female activist, Lisa Marie Galashan, wrote, I'm appalled and embarrassed by my own SNP MP. No one would question her right to vote according to her values and conscience. However, keyword, having done so, she now has to deal with the consequences. So you can have an SNP Scotland, you can have an opinion, you can have a belief in God, you can have a philosophical commitment to something, but you can have it only once if you're in public life. Then we'll hound you out.
Okay.
No wonder people sorry, I just have to say, no wonder people are turning to drink north of the border. Every time I look at Westminster, I think you've got a special dose up there in Scotland.
Yes, it's worse. Now, the MP involved was, excuse me, the MP involved attends the Church of Scotland. I did contact the Church of Scotland press office because they hadn't really said anything. And when I got a call back, or an email back, which says, quote, this is not something we are commenting on. So there we go, another brave stance by the Church of Scotland. Fortunately, the Roman Catholic Church, which is no link to the person involved, actually has a bit more, I think spine is the word we're looking for here. And we've got here Bishop Hugh Gilbert wrote to the First Minister saying, well, amongst other things, quoting Sir Compton Mackenzie, moral courage is readiness to expose oneself to suffering or inconvenience which does not affect the body. It arises from firmness of moral principle and is independent of the physical constitution. So he's calling for the First Minister to do something. He's calling for the First Minister to speak. The First Minister is still silent, like the Church of Scotland is silent on this matter. And just to close, let me nip back to one of Aileen also Campbell's triumphs in the name person fight. This is still policy. This is still on the website of Lanarkshire, of both Lanarkshire councils. This is what happens in Lanarkshire if you are unwise enough to get pregnant. Maternity services come and they have a parental capacity to prove well-being assessment. And under healthy, the question they ask is they look for evidence of capacity to make sure that the unborn baby achieves the highest attainable standards of physical and mental health, access to suitable care and support with any medical issues. So that's what the parents have to do. But when an MP for the SNP party who came up with that policy stands up and says, well, I don't think we should be quite so quick to kill the unborn child, she's vilified. It's a strange, apparent contrast.
Can I just briefly ask a question about that? How do you as parents make sure that an unborn baby achieves the highest attainable standard of mental health?
There are no answers to any of this on the in-person. You've also got to make sure that that unborn baby is included and has links to other unborn babies. The paperwork on this is absolutely hilarious. It's nonsensical in the extreme, but it's saying that we have to protect the children, and at the same time they're saying no, we have to make it easy for the children to be killed. Now, why the apparent contrast? Well, it's not an apparent contrast if you realise it's all about power. They want power to destroy the family, right? And how do you destroy the family? Well, you put the state in one area, you encourage things like abortion, divergent lifestyles, and family breakdown and divorce. So these are the ways the family is attacked. And of course, destroy the family is part of the Communist Manifesto. We know where the ideas come from.
Yes.
David, it's quite remarkable. We often say to our viewers, we don't plan the news the day before. It's all put together on the morning, and it's amazing how often things slot together. So you've just given that excellent summary. This was brought to my attention by several people. So we got the Telegraph: encouraging children to socially transition gender risks long-term harm, say NHS experts. Parents are risking psychologically damaging their children by allowing them to socially transition their gender without medical or psychiatric advice. And it's saying that primary school children are increasingly being encouraged to formally switch in defiance of the recommended watchful waiting approach the Gender Identity Development Service leaders have said. So this is all really excellent stuff. Let's have a look at that Gender Identity Development Service. Here they are. And what are you actually talking about? The Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. Now, I went on that site and I was very interested to see the experts that were quoted in the Telegraph article, but alas, there aren't any details of the experts. So I contacted the Tavistock and Portman Foundation Trust to say, have I missed something? And they said, well, we have so many experts, there's too many to put them on the website.
Oh, really?
So trust us. The people who are put forward as experts are experts because we put them forward. So that's all good. Well, here's the Mail on the same thing. Parents are encouraging children as young as 3 to change gender without consulting specialists, expert warned. So we're not going to tell you what the qualifications of the specialists are or what they really think, but you've got to consult them, and if you do, that's fine. So one of them, Dr. Bernadette Wren, said parents are researching the subject on the internet forums. In 2018, we've got another subheadline here. In 2018, 2,590 children were referred to the Gender Identity Development Service. and referrals to the clinic have almost doubled in 4 years. So this stuff is piling in, we're led to believe. Let's have a look at this lady. Here she is, Dr. Bernadette Wren. She said, "We have had some children who've gone to school and nobody in the school knows what their real sex is. So they turn up as a little girl, but actually they're a little boy. Social transitioning of sex at a younger age can lead to problems when the child is hit by a wall of reality as their body starts to change." So this leads you to believe that basically if a child starts to express some concerns about his or her its own agenda, then this will all come good in due course. But it's not quite that simple. She says, "We think that that is setting up problems for later, i.e. pushing this by the parents too early is setting up problems for later. There's no magic solution. Some families think the social transition means it's all going to be fine, but it's much more complicated. We're anxious that there's some magical thinking that they won't really go through puberty." So she's very keen on magic, a lot of magic tied up in there. We've got more comment here. There are some families where they will talk about it being a hate crime if you get the pronoun wrong with a very young child who's made a social transition. So this is all the comments from the experts. And then we have another organisation quoted in here, which is Mermaids. And in the Telegraph article, Mermaids says this. I assume the comments come from the chief executive, Susie Green, who's the lady on the right. "For some young people, social transition can be very helpful. However, it's important to keep things open across all contexts, including schools and local communities. We need to support young people experiencing distress around their gender identity. We need to support exploration, which may include a social transition for some young people. It's also important to keep curiosity about gender identity alive." So this is rather tending to suggest that actually somebody's in the pot with a big spoon helping people think that they may have a problem. Here's Mermaids, and I was particularly interested in the patrons because two of them are transgender people in the armed forces. So we've got one person here, we've got a second person here, and I think we could say, are these people unbiased in what they put across, or do they have a particular agenda of their own because of their own sexual orientation? It all gets a bit murky. But Mermaids itself, we could have a little look at. They've been given a grant by Children in Need. They've also been given a grant by the Department of Education to deliver, quote, training into 36 schools. Paul Hamlin Foundation has put money in, and so's the Tudor Trust. So basically they're going into schools and they are stirring the pot and getting children to think about this issue. David, I've got a little bit more on this, but just to break very quickly, the moment you start to ask questions about what's actually going on and where all this change in sex is coming from, you seem to see catalysts helping the children to raise questions about their own sexuality.
Yes, because this is entirely new. We see parents, a very small minority of parents, but some parents obviously responding to this and believing the hype. This is the same way as you see people believing the hype about the climate and going out and blocking traffic. And they're responding to this bizarre agenda that's being played out and creating it as a result. This is not something that we had before. It's entirely new. Indeed.
But if we follow Mermaids through, you don't have to go too far before you find quite a lot of controversy about the funding they've been receiving. So I'm going to encourage people to research that for themselves. But this one was interesting. The National Lottery was going to put in a cool $500,000, and they got a bit squidgy with what was going on. And this is part of their report that you can find online, where amongst other things, they highlighted that Mermaids state they work with a range of partners, including the NHS Tavistock Gender Identity Development Service.
Well, that's all a bit revolving door and incestuous, isn't it?
Absolutely, Mike. And of course, in the article you read, you believe that these two are separate.
Independent?
Independent.
Yes.
So the press reporting is very, very devious or sloppy or both. but encourage people to see this for yourselves. There's a lot of information and a lot of concern about this organisation. But let's have a look about statistics. Here's the Office for National Statistics. It said in 2017 there was 755,042 live births in the UK, a decrease. Let's take that rough figure and bring it back with a number of referrals. Now this is very raw statistics, but they said that there were 2,590 children being referred. We've taken 2017, I couldn't get 2018 statistics, but we've got that 755,000 children born. So we're looking at about 0.34% of the population. And interestingly, this figure is less significant than the number of children that actually die. But we're not looking at the number of children who die. We've got this massive attention to children they say are being referred because the children want to change identity. And if we go to the NHS, of course, we find the NHS promoting all this on the back of what I'm going to call skewed statistics, because here they say, for example, highlighted that 34% of the respondents in a survey had considered suicide. But 34% of respondents of what size sample in the community? Let's look at this other one. This is another part of this NH thing. 20% of trans people. These figures, 34%, 20%, put in your mind a figure that this is a massive part of the population. But if I add on that screen, if we just pop it back, the actual percentage we're looking at, we're only dealing with 2% of the population as a whole. So massive amount of publicity and information going in to raising the issue, and those figures being skewed. And I might as well put this one on screen. So this was the Metro gender neutral school uniforms rolled out after parents back plan. So David, this is deliberate skewing, twisting of statistics in order to create a political agenda, which is trying to tell us that we have a massive problem with people who want to change gender.
Yes, it's driving a political agenda, and that agenda is to destabilize the country. You destabilize the country by destabilizing the family unit. And the confusion and pain that's going to be caused to the individuals concerned is going to be enormous. They don't care.
They don't. What can we do about it? Well, I'm going to suggest that members of our audience could be sending letters and emails and tweets of support to Lisa Cameron there in Scotland. She certainly needs help and support. And of course, challenge the people that are putting out these skewed statistics. I think we've just about come to the end of the news there. I'll just add that I had a great pleasure yesterday in being able to spend some time with Melanie Shaw. And I'd like to say to all of our audience that have supported Melanie Shaw over many years now, that was the first direct contact I've had with her in 3 years. Melanie is in good hands. She was with some really wonderful staff in Rampton Hospital. And I'm going to say to people who still want to support Melanie, great care is needed at the moment, that an appropriate message is put across as Melanie starts to move towards improving her situation even further. I will try and get out more information on this, but I have to ask for those people supporting Melanie, great care, please be polite and reasonable in everything you're doing, because what you do can impact on Melanie's situation both in a positive or negative way if the wrong path is followed. But the good news is that I was delighted to see Melanie smiling, looking much better than she's been seen before, and it's clear that she has staff around her who are deeply concerned at her circumstances and indeed how she's got in the position she's currently in. That's it. Thanks very much for joining us. David, thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time on Monday. Bye-bye.
All right.